you recover from closing a chapter of your game mode with one of, if not the shittiest map in the entirety of Zombies history? You follow it up with another awful map. Black Ops 3's lineup of maps as a whole was very hit or miss. It had some impressive and spectacular maps, but it also had its fair share of stinkers. Shadows of Evil falls into the category of the latter. Gone are the days where loading into a map was eerie and mysterious. Every map you load into now has you railroaded along a story beat that gets ham-fisted straight into your face the second the cutscene ends. Which is a shame because Shadows of Evil could have worked better in the horror department had it utilised more subtlety and mystery rather than being right in your face about things. When the map is silent and all there is to distract you is the gargled ramblings of a crawler, this map is genuinely horrifying. It perfectly embodies the feeling of walking around a sprawling cityscape at nighttime, which I'm sure you can relate to. It's unnerving and creepy and even a little claustrophobic at times, and the added effect of heavy rain makes it even creepier and discomforting. Not to mention, when you complete the Pack-a-Punch challenge, the sky turns red, thunder ravages the map, and a giant Cthulhu monster sits in the sky quietly, which is even more terrifying than if it were to be loud and threatening. Each area has its own little theme that plays quietly in the background, and they all do a good job of making things seem mysterious and creepy, even if the gameplay is doing precisely the opposite. It's unfortunate you don't often get much time to enjoy the scenery because the gameplay is very chaotic. The score, however, still remains a perfectly reasonable 4 out of 6 for how creepy the map can be. I particularly like the theme of corruption and how on the surface everything is relatively normal and unassuming, but below that is a whole slew of mess, and once Pack-a-Punch has been completed, the entire world is corrupted by this entity. It's a neat idea, but it doesn't tie in well with zombies, although the implementation was still decent enough. Shadows of Evil's layout is pretty meh. You have 6 zones, one of which you start in. The majority of the zones has a thing that you do in it, and once all 4 of these things are done, the 5th zone opens up more. The first zone, i.e. spawn, is pretty shit. It's one big corridor with a potential training spot above it, but that training spot is not very good. The first door opens out to the hub area that connects all 5 zones, which is open enough to possibly survive in for an okay amount of time. The second zone on the left from spawn facing the hub is probably the best and worst zone because it has an area that's just full of corridors, but also one big open area that's a decent training spot. The zone to the right from spawn, facing the hub, is another pretty shit area. It has open, quotation marks, areas, but they're not good training spots, and this is especially true for the boxing arena. The zone opposite spawn facing the hub is probably the second best of all the zones, because it's one big street where the cars are somehow miraculously parked and positioned to form a nice big circle for you to run zombies around in, and the burlesque is a pretty open area with a stage that the zombies can't jump up onto and therefore have to take the stairs on either side, but you're able to just jump straight up onto it. The 5th zone is probably the best, and it's the zone underneath the hub area. This zone is pretty spacious and can be used as an okay training spot, but once Pack-a-Punch is open, you get a massive sprawling square arena where you can run on walls for safety, more on that in a bit, and the zombies can't get to you. It's the only real good training spot on the map and the most optimal strategy, next to using the tram carts that connect the zones as a camping spot. So there are some viable spots to utilize camping and training, but they're very few and far between, and by that I mean there's only one optimal spot for each strategy. There are also portals that serve as the only method of getting down to the 5th zone until opened using beast mode, but they don't serve much of a purpose after opening Pack-a-Punch. Zombies still spawn in out of thin air, and barriers are pretty useless and remain very scarce, which is a shame. Overall, pretty meh. The training spot on this map around Pack-a-Punch can be quite fun, but that's all there is of interest in this map design-wise. A low 3 out of 6 pretty much sums up the way I feel about this map's design. It's not something to shout home about. The gameplay is honestly Shadows of Evil's main issue. Much like Origins, this map is jam-packed with many new features and gizmos to play around with. I'll quickly list them and what I think of them, then get to some of the more broad points on how this map plays. Gobblegums are the main new thing that sticks out immediately upon opening the first door, and provide many benefits that you can randomly roll for based on the Gobblegum types you select in the Zombies main menu. This can be anything from being able to instantly board up windows, to buying Pack-a-Punch guns off of wall buys, spawning in power-ups, or getting literally every single perk on the map. They are very powerful depending on which ones you have in your selection, and can make runs far easier and more efficient. The shield is back, but with a little bit of a twist. Now it has the ability to propel you forward in a charged dash that will kill anything it comes into contact with, which is pretty neat, and these recharge over the rounds. You can now hold a special third weapon that requires charges to use and expends these charges in different ways once equipped. The special weapon of this map is the Apothecon Sword, which upgrades into the Keeper Sword. It is a melee weapon that deals a lot of damage and has a secondary effect which causes a lightning AoE attack on the ground. It is the second wonder weapon next to the buildable Apothecon Servant, which essentially fires Gersh device projectiles and is probably one of the most powerful wonder weapons introduced so far. There is a robot that you can summon as an NPC ally if you collect all the fuses around the map and bring them to their respective panels. He's decently powerful, but not something to rely on for completing a round. The monkey bombs are replaced with little Arnies, which are cute little Cthulhu monsters in a jar that, if thrown, will attract and instantly kill anything in its area of effect, making them effectively better than monkeys, but not as cool as Gershes. For me. The Margwa boss is annoying. It's a 3-headed Cthulhu monster, who would have guessed, that progressively gets faster and more aggressive the more of its heads you explode. He's not too bad to deal with when he has multiple heads, but on his last head he will absolutely gun it for you at sprint speed, and his strong attack is an instant red screen even with Juggernog. It's more about managing him. And he's not too difficult to deal with once you know how to properly deal with him. The dog rounds are now replaced with flying Cthulhu monsters, and it's a cakewalk, though if you've done the Pack-a-Punch mission, then living exploding meatballs will chase you instead, and they're a lot more deadly and fast, which is a nice shake-up. And that's about everything new besides the weapon roster that I can't encapsulate into how this map plays out. Unfortunately, buildable traps are gone, but the pre-placed traps are plentiful this time around, and some are actually pretty strong, which is a welcome change, though I personally think buildable traps are better. The weapon roster itself is definitely a step up from Black Ops 2, with a lot of iconic guns like the Dingo, Man of War, ICR-4, and even some amazing wall buys like the KN-44 and the HVK. There's some phenomenal concepts here that are sadly trapped for now in a map that makes attempting to experience all of these a chore. Right off the bat, Beast Mode is introduced to you and you have no idea what to do with it. In Beast Mode you have an electric attack, a melee attack, and a grapple move. This mode is sort of like Afterlife from Mob of the Dead, but you would never use it like you would Afterlife. Anything that glows orange with fire you must melee, anything that has a grapple sign you can grapple to, and panels that are on fire can be shot to power them up. Powering up things can be anything from mechanisms to access items to utility items like perks and doors, again similarly to Afterlife. The only thing with Beast Mode is that it is pure utility. You don't go into it when you die, it's just something that you choose to do. And believe me, you have to do an unbelievable amount with it. So much so that it's recommended by YouTubers to exploit map design to get things done as early as possible, just to have an enjoyable experience of this map. The basic premise of the entire map is to sacrifice 4 people in each district to get gateworms to corrupt the world, but also gain access to Pack-a-Punch. Getting these items have their own little puzzles, so it's best to make the most out of each beast mode use. What ends up happening is half the time you're slaying zombies, the other half is spent in beast mode doing Zelda-esque puzzles to get the item to proceed in the map's story. It's pretty boring and takes way too much time to do, and it's likely you could end up dying during the process, as the sacrificing process locks you into certain rooms with keepers chasing you down, and some of these rooms are painful to be in. I'm looking at you, Boxing Arena. Once all of the sacrifices are done, you get to access the Pack-a-Punch room. This is probably one of the worst and best training spots ever. It's the best because wall running is pretty neat for escaping zombies because they can't do that, but it's the worst because you have the potential to either be knocked off or never start the running animation and just plunge to your death, killing you instantly. It's probably the highest risk-reward spot to run, and it'll either pay off or it'll make you want to headbutt your monitor. But you'd honestly be lucky to make it that far unless you know how to perfectly route your beast mode uses, and even after that you'd also be lucky to get the Apothicon Servant or the Apothicon Sword. The sword's process of acquisition is unbelievably tedious, and the Apothicon Servant is slightly less so, but it's still lengthy. In a nutshell, you have to speedrun this map every time you play it just to have the opportunity to have fun. It's a similar thing to Origins, and I'm not here for it. So the gameplay gets a 2 out of 6. Sometimes I actually forget that this map exists. And I think that should speak volumes of what score I'm about to give for replayability. Whenever I think about this map, I feel many of the same things I feel when I think about Origins. It's tedious, it's more difficult than it needs to be, and it's not fun or interesting. The fact that the new features this map introduces gets utilised miles better on other maps makes me incredibly reluctant to ever play this map again, when I remember that it exists. Therefore, its replayability score gets an abysmally low 1 out of 6. I just now realised that the score for this map just got progressively worse as it went on. The map is technically stalemated between a 2 out of 6 and a 3 out of 6, and honestly, I'm just going to throw a 2 out of 6 at it. The replayability and gameplay are a core component of what keeps a zombies map alive, and the map design and horror are essentially the icing on top of the cake. And this is definitely the case with this map. The icing tastes lovely, but the actual cake underneath is stale and shit. That's essentially the entire map summed up in one phrase. I don't think I can say it any better than that. Thankfully, the next time I came round to Treyarch's house, they took some baking lessons, and their next attempt at making a map cake was actually pretty decent. Der Eisendrache was in essence a mix of a lot of mechanics from other maps, in some cases done better, but it also suffers from some of the same negatives these features had in their respective maps. That analysis will mainly be left for the gameplay segment, though there are some features that crop up here and there, and some comparisons that have to be made to other maps and other segments as well. And one of those segments is in the horror department. Der Eisendrache is not very scary. It doesn't do anything particularly well. The map is lit by moonlight, but it almost feels like daylight because of how much snow there is and how generally vibrant the colours of this map are. No detail about this map makes me feel any sense of fear. The map is set in a castle on a cliff, and in fact you can see a town below in the valley that looks to be particularly busy with spotlights and well-lit buildings. Sure, it might give you a sense of isolation, but that feeling isn't compounded with being isolated in a place that is not very welcoming. Der Eisendrache feels like a guided tour around a laboratory situated within a castle, with a zero-gravity room as its main attraction and jump pads being a little fun side activity. It feels like a theme park. It suffers as well from having the map's story thrown onto you, and there's just so much talking and so many quotes of "we need to get this thing done and that thing done" that it really takes away from being able to just immerse yourself in the surroundings, which was a similar gripe I had with Shadows of Evil. Another comparison to be made is Der Eisendrach's horror with that of Moon's horror. The Easter eggs of both maps end in a much similar way, with one blowing up the Earth and one blowing up the Moon. Blowing up the Earth is far more terrifying than blowing up the Moon, because the Moon is very clearly uninhabitable, whereas Earth is humanity's home. Sure, both set pieces look amazing, but whereas blowing up the Earth gives a feeling of dread, blowing up the Moon is almost a sigh of relief in this case. And I know that's essentially the theming of the story for Black Ops 3, but that also translates over into Der Eisendrach's entire horror element. It's almost a relief knowing that all the map is a brightly lit theme park and not some horrific, terrifying place. 1 out of 6 for that. But even though the map looks like a theme park, it's just as fun as one, and that translates into its map design. There are so many awesome spots that you can use as both camping and training areas in this map. My personal favourite spot to train in is the Zero Gravity Room, which is huge and gets even bigger when you can run on walls and fly around, knowing it's pretty difficult for the zombies to get you. It even has a little area that you can use as a camping spot and as a get out of jail free card, as it's basically a jump pad to a completely different part of the map, granting you some safety. You can train in many other areas too, such as at the top of the castle, in the room where you can build the Ragnarok DG4s, outside of that room in the courtyard, by the rocket testing grounds, and also around where Double Tap is. This map is absolutely chock full of training spots that make for endless fun and variety. The same also goes for camping spots. The aforementioned jump pad in the Zero Gravity Room works wonders. The teleporter to the rocket testing grounds is extremely good in both areas. Any of the 3 jump pads basically counts as a spot, and sitting by Juggernog is pretty risky, but the zombies will funnel in through one spot, which makes it pretty decent. Again, endless variety. I'd say the map is big enough to warrant zombies spawning in from indefensible barriers, but I'm still gonna complain about that fact. They have gobblegums for rebuilding barriers that are pretty fucking useless on a map where 90% of spawns are not from barriers. But to be fair, with how much variety you have in this map, I doubt much else matters. My only gripe with Der Eisendrach's map design is the fact that an entire area becomes a death zone when the rocket testing area boots up the rocket. But that tends to be easily avoided, so it's not too bad, but you are going to have it instantly end at least one run at some point. However, infinite variety, so 6 out of 6, definitely a well-designed map. Gameplay though is where I have some criticisms. In comparison to Shadows of Evil, you can utilise all the new features here much easier and more frequently. The Ragnarok DG4s are the special weapon of the map and are far easier to build. They're also the most badass sounding special wonder weapon, and they're also very powerful, and I love them to bits. The Gondola is a new feature wherein which fuses for it will randomly drop from zombies, and when used in the spawn room console will give you a random power up, which can be incredibly useful at times, especially when you're lacking ammo or points. Accessing Pack-a-Punch is as easy as teleporting all the parts to the rocket testing area, and then it becomes available in several parts of the map depending on where it teleports to. It's almost a matter of spending points to get it, which is nice and allows for easy access to double Pack-a-Punching, which gives new effects to your guns, which was introduced in Shadows of Evil but I forgot. The rocket shield is easy to build and all the parts are obvious as to where they are. All round it's a much more easygoing map. Even the new bow wonder weapon is easy to access. You just have to feed 3 dragon heads in a similar style to the wolf heads in Mob of the Dead, and there you have it, bow. The only 2 problems I have with the gameplay are the Panzer and the upgraded bows. These are the 2 features from Origins that I absolutely despise. Granted, when you get these bows, they're extremely powerful and fun to use, especially when everyone has one, but getting them is such a pain in the arse. You have to look up these steps to getting the bows, or you're never gonna figure it out. I'll give them the fact that you can just acquire the standard bow very easily and simply via the dragon heads, as that bow is decently strong in its own right, but the steps are precisely like how you get and upgrade the staves in Origins. Utterly ludicrous. The Panzer returns and he's got a new kit. He still has his flamethrower, but his grapple hook is thankfully replaced by shock spikes that he can fire and stick to surfaces in an attempt to slow you down and damage you. It is far more bearable than the game-ending claw, but he's still tanky as fuck, even with the bows, and he can really fuck you up sometimes if you aren't careful. Thankfully, those two aspects of the map don't massively kill my will to play it as much as they did in Origins, but they're still negative factors nonetheless. I like that everyone can get a wonder weapon, but I don't think players should be put through this much effort just to cop them. The gameplay is definitely a step up from both Shadows of Evil and Origins though, and I essentially view Horizon Drac as Origins if it was good. Therefore a generous 4 out of 6 is warranted. It's an improvement, but there is a better rival waiting a bit further ahead. This is the part of Horizon Drac's review where I was in two minds, and I think this is probably going to be the one time where the replayability segment is going to actually have some length to it for once. This was my favourite map of Black Ops 3 when it came out, but over time I lost the will to play it. Admittedly, after writing this review, I'm genuinely excited to return to it and play it through again, but at the same time, I'm also not likely to revisit it anytime soon afterwards. It is pretty boring to have to fill 3 dragon heads for 15 minutes before getting the bow, and then spending another 30 minutes just to do the bow steps for the upgrade. Admittedly, when it is all done, you can have fun, but the need for absolute points efficiency is still there and can kill the vibe of wanting to play the map when you know you have to do all that to enjoy the map to its fullest. Again, not saying it's Origins level bad or Shadows of Evil tedious, but it does factor in. It's a very 60-40 case when it comes to wanting to play the map nowadays, when you know that there are easier maps that you can play much more casually. Horizon Drac does enough though to keep the casual player satisfied, while giving the hardcore fans something to work towards, so for that I will give it another generous 4 out of 6. This map is very up and down for me. It has some amazing aspects, but also some areas in which I'm slightly agitated, or left longing for something more. The Horizon Drac is 100% an improvement from the 2 pretty dreadful maps that came before it, and considering where the scores lie, it's probably best it lays at a 4 out of 6. What it does right, it does phenomenally, though in other areas, even in parts where it falls flat, there's a longing for it to have been better. Those parts that are bad don't drag the score down to awful levels, but there's still a sense that had there been some touch-ups done in areas where it was weak, I'm sure this map could have easily been higher than a 4 out of 6. The same, unfortunately, can't be said for the next map in Black Ops 3's roster. Zetsubou no Shima is a disappointment, plain and simple. It's not a good map in any respect, it's not fun, it's not engaging, and it nears Origin's level of difficulty, which is bad. But it doesn't just fail at gameplay or map design, it also fails in the thing it was supposed to be good in: horror. This map was bigged up in advertising material to be a return to form in terms of horror, likening it to legendary maps such as Shino Numa, Nakda Untoten, and Verrucht. The reality is it comes nowhere near as scary as those maps because it bases its horror element on phobias, jump scares, and loud noises. This is absolutely no way to do your horror, especially in a game mode that has seen and done far better scary environments. And that's what I'll start with, the environment. At most, I'll say that it's creepy. The spider home area is pretty creepy, the bunker has some terrifying vibes to it, but that's it. I just look at it and think, sheesh, there's spiders in there, and that's all. I'm a bit aquaphobic, so going underwater in deep places is pretty terrifying for me, same as I have a phobia for spiders. But if someone doesn't have these phobias, then the horror element of this map falls flat and it then resorts to shitty jump scares. Around the map are these orange bubbles filled with gas bulging out of various walls. Bursting these bubbles will release this gas, and if it is inhaled, the characters start hallucinating. This can be anything from loud disembodied whispering to environments being more bloodied than usual or changing before your very eyes. But all of this is announced with the most explosively loud sound to make you jump. This is not horror. This is just a cheap scare. To compare this to the likes of Nacht Verrucht or Shino Numa is insulting. For this very reason, Zetsubou gets an automatic 2 out of 6 for horror, because sure, an attempt was made. That's why it's a 2 out of 6 and not a 1 out of 6. But this is nowhere near terrifying in any way when put side by the horror giants. The map layout is so awful that you have 2 choices for consistent training spots. One you can only access near the end of the Easter egg, which takes forever to do, and the other you can only access after cleansing each skull in the middle of the challenge podiums to access the skull of Nam Sapwe, the special wonder weapon of the map, as that area is literally a massive circle perfect for training in. Both of those spots require you, however, to do the most excruciating setup I've ever done in my entire life just to be able to have fun on this map. Camping spots are non-existent. I could not find a single spot where camping might be viable. For a second I thought the little lake in Spawn would be decent, but zombies spawn inside it, so it don't work. The rest of the map is just corridor after corridor after corridor after swimming segment after corridor after swimming segment after corridor after fucking corridor. It's god awful, and I've been killed several times just trying to set up. It's not designed to be fun like Der Eisendrache is, it's designed to be scary. It seems to be becoming a pattern that the devs have lost the art of making a map that is good in all these aspects and not just focusing on one. I honestly don't have much else to say for map design. It's pure hot garbage and deserves a 2 out of 6 only because if you can set up, you might have some fun. But let's talk about this long setup, shall we? There are too many fucking doors. I have to hope and pray I get something good on my first spin of the box, or I'll have no hope of making it to the bunker until round 10. You have to do so much running around for water and micromanaging plants that I feel like I'm playing a farming sim. Sure, you have challenges to help you, but when the challenge is to blow up 8 webs with explosives and there's like 6 things on the map that can be webbed, I have to wait until past round 7 to complete that for what? A carpenter? Like I'm gonna do all of that for 200 points. And what's funny is the spiders can block off doors with webs, but they can't be blown up with grenades. The logic in this map hurts trying to understand. Hell, some of these challenges are based on random fucking chance. It is random if the swamp monster zombie spawns, and he spawns in fast. One of the challenges asks you to kill 3 zombies while they're undergoing the transformation into this boss zombie. The kick is this may happen only if they're inhaling the orange gas. And when they do start transforming, you have about 1 second to kill that zombie or you've missed the opportunity to contribute to the challenge. It is painful. Accessing Pack-a-Punch is technically even easier in this map than accessing it in Der Eisendrache, as all you need is a lever to drain the water, and there you have it. But where this lever is situated past every single fucking door in the goddamn map. So you have to spend something like triple the amount you would on actually pack-a-punching your gun just to access the machine. Oh, and good luck getting the Skull of Nam Sapway before you die on this map. While an incredibly fun to use special wonder weapon, accessing it requires you to pretty much open up the entire map, summon zombies during the cleansing process 4 times for each skull, then return them to the pedestal to then do the same thing with the Skull of Nam Sapway, but with keepers chasing you instead. It is so unnecessarily tedious and boring. The main wonder weapon in this map is the KT-4, and while a decent wonder weapon, it's a buildable that requires more door opening to get, and it is exceptionally underwhelming to use. It just makes things explode into spore dust. Yay. In the prior map, we had bows that could summon skulls from another dimension to eat the faces off of zombies, could shoot wolf heads that would blast back zombies and slow them, could entrap zombies in a miniature volcano and blast them with hot lava, could literally explode zombies with a tornado of fucking lightning, and in this map, it's a gun that makes things explode. Wow. The door marshals upgraded were more fun to use. A normal-ass, boring-ass gun is more fun to use than the wonder weapon. Need I say more? I despise this map with my entire being. Zetsubou's gameplay is a fucking 1 out of 6, man. By now, you can already imagine what my replayability score is. Even just from playing the map for gameplay footage, I was bored shitless. This is probably the most uninteresting map before all of the Black Ops 4 maps. I'm unlikely to ever play this map again past the gameplay footage you're currently seeing. I shall not miss it in the slightest. I do not want to play a map that boils down to an hour and a half of setup time, thank you very much. Zetsubou's replayability score is a 1 out of 6. So we're tied again. Considering that the lesser categories are the places where the majority of the higher scores were seen for Zetsubou, I feel content with giving it a 1 out of 6. It's devoid of anything interesting, and it is completely out of sync with the tone of the Black Ops 3 roster. If you want what this map is attempting to replicate, go and play Shinonuma. This is a legendary map. I played this map 6 times just to get the gameplay footage you're about to see. Don't get me wrong, this map has its flaws, but I don't think I can quite put into words just how incredible Gorod Krovi is, so instead I'm going to show you. This is what a singular fully set up round looks like on this map.
Area.
dragon is ready to release his fury. Something not right. Release your inner warrior, Dragon Child. I punch you into the next life. You have invoked only rage, demon.
This clip perfectly encapsulates everything about this map that I love. But I also hope that you may have noticed its glaring flaws, and if you didn't, I'm going to point one of them out to you now. This map does not do horror in the traditional Zombies fashion. Yes, that does mean that Gorod Krovi's horror score suffers a bit from this, but it doesn't take it down to anything below a 3 out of 6. Gorod's horror more so thrives on the chaos it creates to incite a sense of panic and uneasiness because there's so much going on that you might not know where the next biggest threat is coming from. In the opening scenes of the map, a bombardment of artillery shells explodes around the starting area, making you panic in case those shells are actually trying to hit you. It's a noteworthy point to mention, this map is set in World War II Stalingrad, but with added futuristic and fantastical elements such as giant mechs and huge dragons patrolling the skies. I think Gorod Krovi is the best mesh of both of these elements because Stalingrad during World War II got absolutely wrecked during that conflict, and so adding mechs, robots and dragons to the mix only accentuates the destruction further. It's a map that cranks up the adrenaline, but also makes you feel a little hopeless considering the conflict you're caught up in. Compared to a map that has a similarly busy backdrop like Origins, Gorod works better because the map can become more mellow at times, especially inside buildings. Where Pack-a-Punch is located is within a Nacht-esque house that, while still within the bounds of all the chaos, tones things down a little and acts almost as a respite, so that when you leave, you're slowly thrown back into the chaotic nature of the main map and the adrenaline builds up again. It feels more like being within the aftermath of the conflict and not the actual conflict itself, so there is that sense of horror, it's just conveyed in a way that is unique from every other map before it. Again though, this horror is not comparable to maps such as Verrückt or Doris in terms of it being terrifying or haunting. If the map was not so chaotic and lively, I reckon areas like the shop and the library would have a much more impactful horror element to them, but they're all tainted by the knowledge that there's something more concerning going on outside those four walls. It also doesn't help that the map is set in broad daylight. For a map that is mostly made up of outside areas, a nighttime setting would have made this map much more creepy and enhanced the already existing horror elements that get damped by the fact that the map is so vibrant. A map like Kino works well in broad daylight because it mostly takes place inside a theatre that you're trapped in, and the alleyway is so creepy because it gives you a false sense of freedom in a small place and gives you a glimpse of the completely empty city further away. With Gorod, you practically travel the entire town without really feeling a sense of entrapment. A lot of these barriers are just piles of rubble or train parts or tall trenches that look like they'd be easy to hop over. There's the argument to be made that the bombardment would kill you if you did go outside of the bounds of the map, but so many areas within the map are just out in the open that whoever is operating those artillery cannons is clearly a lousy shot if they can't hit me standing in the middle of an open space. But anyway, the map's horror is not really horror in the sense that we've known it throughout this journey through the maps, but it does have its moments. It acts more like an epic set piece, which is really the direction this map lent towards extremely far to begin with, and it works well, especially when it comes to the gameplay. So for its complementary uplifting of the gameplay, and in the moments where hints of the traditional sense of CoD Zombies horror shines through sometimes, Gorod's horror gets a 3 out of 6. Map design is an element that I was left longing for, which was not something I was expecting to do from a map that I hold to such high regard. There are plenty of camping spots, and good ones at that. To name a few, literally any dragon summoner terminal is a great spot because you can just escape on the dragon if things get hairy. The top of the armory by the elevator is amazing because no zombies can come in from behind you, and the elevator is a decent escape route to literally the other side of the map. There's a spot in the upstairs part of the Pack-a-Punch building opposite to the Dragon Artillery marker where no zombies can get to you except from one side. And lastly, there's one debris by Stamina Up that bridges across to the store where no zombies can come to you except from in front, and the dragon's fire can't reach you. It's a bit risky though when you only have a one-time use escape route before you can never use that spot again, but it's definitely effective, especially with the wonder weapon. But aside from these camping spots, there's not really any training spots besides the library, which was shown in the clip. And even with that spot, you need the dragon shield to make it consistent and require all the wonder weapons to minimize the possibility of getting caught under the stairs. Besides the library, there's no other spot I can think of that makes for a good training spot on this map. In fact, you have to camp on this map, at least I found, to ensure a successful setup with minimal risk. I'll get onto that more in a bit, but the fact both strategies are possible even if one is heavily favoured means that I can at least give Gorod's map design a fairly decent 4 out of 6. I do wish there were more training spots, but I can't necessarily complain when Gorod's gameplay is incredible. But before I gush about it, I need to get the other flaw out of the way first. The baby dragon special wonder weapon that you can get, while being the most powerful and most fun special wonder weapon to use, takes forever to get. In my opinion, it's worth it, 200%, but it's so unnecessarily long. In fact, the gameplay clip that I showed, which was in the mid-round 20s, was taken shortly after I acquired the gauntlet. It takes that long to get. But to be honest, this is not as bad of a flaw as I might view everything in Origins to be, because everything else is piss easy to get. The new Ray Gun Mark III, which is my personal favourite wonder weapon of all time, can be acquired straight out of the mystery box. And the shield is exceptionally easy to build considering how powerful it is. Top that with the fact that the Dragon Airstrike marker, which acts like a better monkey bomb, is quite easy to acquire with all the other stuff, and getting the baby dragon gauntlet seems pretty easy, because it's the ultimate cherry on top of all the other powerful things you can acquire on this map. Though considering the fact that on average I get everything before the dragon gauntlet by round 15, and on average I get the dragon gauntlet by round 22 to 25, that's a massive amount of time that it takes just to acquire this weapon. Again, 200% worth it, but it just takes a little bit too long. And some of that time could be shaved off to make the setup time more consistent. For reference, the process goes that you acquire the dragon egg from the Pack-a-Punch area and take it to a nest to be bathed in the dragon's fire. Once the dragon lights it up, it has to cool for 2 rounds. Once cooled, you have to do a series of 3 different challenges that take varying amounts of time to do, such as melee killing zombies or hitting collateral kills. Once the challenges are done, you have to take the egg back to the Pack-a-Punch area to incubate the egg, which you have to defend from a zombie attack. Then it has to cool again for a round, then you have to take the egg back to the challenge podium to eventually claim the gauntlet. It's unnecessarily complicated and there's too many steps to it, but it's the only thing that requires you to run through all these hoops, and being able to focus solely on that makes it much easier to do compared to Origins that has several of these things that are multiple steps long and it all feels a bit overwhelming. Gorod as a whole does not face this issue as greatly, so this implementation of something that has multiple requirements to fulfill feels a bit more healthier and fun in some respects. But now that that's out of the way, oh my god, the gameplay of Gorod is exceptional. Believe me when I say, the bosses of this map, the best bosses in the entirety of Zombies. Even though the Mangler is kinda easy to kill, their intimidating bassy voices about how you're the invaders, and that you need to be exterminated, and that their sole purpose is that they're there to kill you, is just 50 shades of badass. The Valkyrie drones are just as amazing. Again, they're somewhat easy to dispatch of, but their mechanical bellowing about finding and analysing specimens and then their experimental programming is to zap the living shit out of you is a concept that is scary but also awesome for a boss enemy. Also, their flying movement sound is top-notch. This map endlessly satisfies my itch for bassy sounds. The dragons coming in to breathe fire in locations, crashing down into buildings with a loud, audible, ground-shaking thud is just... wissimo. And the ray gun reload sound? The mechanical clinks and clanks mixed with electrical and steam sizzling sounds combined into a powerful package of creating a literal fucking black hole to suck the zombies in is beautiful. They had a missed opportunity to make it sound like the Gersh device, which would have made the guns my all-time favourite wonder weapons of all time, but nonetheless, this entire map satisfies my ears to no end, and when the chaos unfolds in the later rounds and they're throwing everything at you, incredible. No other map replicates it in any way. In fact, I'm going to keep going. The baby dragon's fire attack is just such a nice, satisfying sound with some heft to it when you initiate it. The Dragon Shield's fireball attack is gorgeous, and my god, the Dragon Airstrike, where the dragon fires fireballs from above and then roars as it flies away, is a sight to behold. Experience this map for yourself, please. I beg you. I literally refuse to play this map on anything but 100% volume. Even though this map has its flaws, the gameplay is getting an exceptionally biased 7 out of 6. I will fight you. The gameplay literally utilizes every single element at its disposal, and I'm constantly switching weapons and micromanaging my arsenal in a way no other map makes me do. Going for high rounds on this map is limitless fun just because of the variety of your arsenal alone. Nothing else comes close to how fun Gorod Krovi is. Even the challenges are nice and easy this time around. Kill 8 zombies on the elevator trap in one use. Shoot the helmets off of Mangler zombies 5 times. Shoot the camera out of the Valkyrie drones 5 times. Walk into Dragon's Fire and survive. Nice and easy stuff that rewards you handsomely. Gorod deserves its score for gameplay wholeheartedly. Replayability is unquestionable. Sure, it can be a bit daunting having to go through a 25 round long process just to get one thing, but along the way your power grows at exponential rates until you eventually feel like a damn god murking zombies and machines left and right. Of course I'm going to want to come back to that. Without any doubts in my mind, 6 out of 6 for replayability on this map. For how fun high rounds are to go for on this map, and the fact that I'd be willing to go for them based on how fun the gameplay is, it definitely deserves this score. So where does my opinion lie on the map as a whole? I'm a little bit biased, if only for this singular map. Tying up all the scores together in a fashion that reflects a more realistic score, I will say that for sure this map deserves a lofty 5 out of 6. There are, of course, 2 glaring flaws this map has, but one is a fairly minor aesthetic gripe, and the other is a poorly considered and unnecessarily lengthy process for a weapon that is arguably the most powerful special wonder weapon ever. These don't massively impact the score enough to warrant excessive scrutiny, and considering the fact that once you have everything in your possession and the variety of your enemies is much more balanced and well designed, both functionally and aesthetically, you're getting a rock-solid map that has a couple rough edges that you forget about more often than not. I love Gorod Krovi for the fact that it aesthetically combines all the elements of what CoD Zombies was becoming, i.e. futuristic tech built using pastime resources with a steampunk aesthetic, mixed with potentially plausible fantasy elements of genetically engineered dragons created through that same unethically bound extremist science. It's a shame that we won't ever get something this good again after this, as the next map will pain me to my core to talk about. I hesitate to really call Revelations a map, as it's more so an amalgamation of other maps set in the middle of quite literally nowhere. Because of this, it's a pretty forgettable map due to a lot of the areas being from other, better and more memorable maps. That is, however, not to say that it doesn't throw in some of its own unique locations, features and mechanics. It's just that some of these unique areas could have been better expanded upon. Revelations sort of acts more as a teaser to the jam-packed Zombies Chronicles DLC that features remastered maps such as Nacht, Verrucht, Shinonuma, Shangri-La, Moon and Origins, and less so of a meaningful addition to the unique roster we got throughout Black Ops 3. Despite all this, though, it is still a map, so I must subject it to the same scrutiny as the others, just in a slightly different way due to how many of its elements being borrowed from other maps. One thing I will say that Revelations does as a map itself is bring back the nostalgia of previous maps, but in a much more sinister way. The blue sun that shines over the entire map makes the lighting feel extremely out of place for maps like Kino, Shangri-La, Der Eisendrache and Verrucht, which otherwise have a much brighter, more orange lighting in their standalone maps. So placed in the context of Revelations, where the lighting doesn't match the map segments in the way that we know them, it creates a sense of uneasiness and discomfort, as well as a feeling of corruption. The same can be said for the way that the maps are merged together. You'll walk through Der Eisendrache, remembering where a path usually leads, only to come out in a completely different map entirely. And while they seamlessly merge these segments of all the maps together, you can't help but feel a little dazed and confused at the sudden change of environment. It all feels unnatural, which is good in the context of the map's horror, and this juxtaposition works even in the unique environments it has, such as the starting room. The opening cutscene of the map shows the front part of the house in bright sunlight, which is then juxtaposed by the harsh blue sun when you actually enter the map itself. Another more unique environment is within the giant apothecan's belly, which has all sorts of skeletal bones jotted around the place and unnatural anatomy that would make anyone cringe. For what it's worth, the way in which the new and unique parts of the environment interact with the old map segments creates a pretty unnerving experience that makes for a pretty decent score. I'm just stuck as to whether it does this at the level of a 4 out of 6 or a 5 out of 6. Part of me wants to give it a 5 out of 6 because all the older maps, even ones I didn't think were all that scary, get a bit of an upgrade to their horror department here due to what Revelations does to them. But at the same time, I don't think the map itself should get any bonus points for using nostalgia as a silver bullet. To be honest, I think it at least deserves a 4 out of 6, which is to say that it is good, but nothing above and beyond, which is fitting. The same philosophy boils over into map design as well. Revelations practically picks and chooses what segments it wants from older maps and just uses those. So what you end up getting is a bunch of incredible training spots from previous maps, for example, Der Eisendrache's anti-gravity room and Kino's stage area, connected by jump pads that make for very good camping spots, and portal areas that make for a hybrid of both. Its map design is very good in that regard, but again, it's not that unique shit. But the unique stuff it does do, though, is good. The Apothecan Belly is an amazing intertwined training area with lots of safe spots to get out of trouble, and the starting room is a decently large rectangular area with enough room to train in. Interestingly enough, zombies come out of barriers most of the time, such as in Shangri-La and Nacht, but a lot of other areas don't have rebuildable barriers, so in much the same way, Revelations carries the follies of prior maps in the same way that it does the positives. It's still a decent map to play on though, but it's not really treading any new ground we haven't set foot on before. And so while it's good, it only stands to get a 4 out of 6 in this category. Gameplay is a bit more interesting, but again, it's just stuff that's slightly expanded upon from prior maps. Take the helmet mechanic, for example, something which was derived from Gord Crovey that had things like the Mangler helmet to take less damage from Manglers and the Valkyrie helmet to take less damage from Valkyries. Revelations also has a vast array of hats you can unlock as the game progresses. They all have different unlock conditions and provide different benefits depending on which ones you wear. Some increase your sprint speed, shown by a purple stamina up icon, and some give you more health, as shown with a purple juggernaut icon. But depending on which boss enemy the helmet is depicting, will give you different bonuses against that type of boss, such as more damage dealt to that boss and less damage taken from that boss. But the best helmet by far is the Apothecon helmet, which gives you more health and reduces damage from all sources, while also increasing your damage output against all sources. You end up becoming a 10-hit down with this helmet, making you exceptionally powerful, though to get this helmet you have to defeat a certain number of every boss and boss type within the stomach acid of the massive Apothecon while there is green gas present. This is exceptionally tough to do, even on higher rounds, and especially so considering the types of bosses in this map. I'm going to list every boss here to save time, because describing what they all do would take way too long, so here they all are. The Elemental Magwas, the Keepers, the Spiders, the Furies, the Derizen Drachpanda Soldat, and the Flying Bugs from Shadows of Evil. They're all present in this map, with the only new unique inclusion being the Furies. It's cool that there are so many different boss enemies in one map, but sometimes it can be a bit too much. However, they do give you all these helmets to unlock, so they kind of have to balance that out a bit. They also kind of have an excuse, though, to throw everything at you when they put two of the most powerful wonder weapons in the box that you can just get pretty easily. The Thunder Gun and the Apothecon Servant. They get a bit boring to use after a while, though, because these weapons are very much a click to make the enemies disappear type of weapon, and not something you can switch up from time to time like the wonder weapons from Gorod Krovi. The gameplay honestly feels very samey to other maps, just with less fun tools. The only thing that you can get that's a bit more fun to use is the Ragnarok DG4s, but even those you get straight out of the box. There isn't anything here to build, just hats you have to work for, and those aren't even an active thing you can use. So while I can't complain about the fact that Revelations is very casual, and therefore there's inherently some fun to be had with that considering how all the other maps play, I can't help but feel it would have been nice to have at least one weapon that is unique and fun to use, that you had to at least work a little bit for. I know I said I don't like long setup times, but there's a difference between having some setup and having too much. Revelation's gameplay score, seeing as it's very middle of the road, gets a 3 out of 6. I can't fault it, but there could have been a little more meat on the plate, if you know what I mean. I have to talk about Revelation's replayability within the context of the game it's in and the maps that feature around it. Considering the fact that every map that features within Revelations also exists within Black Ops 3, you can go and play those other maps and experience all their unique features separately from Revelations. This map suffers from not having anything unique enough in it to make it stand out from the rest. You get into this map and you see all the old maps, and really it makes you want to play them instead of this one. The only reason I've even replayed Revelations since I last played it when I was doing all the Easter eggs, which was something like 2 to 3 years ago, was because of this video. Otherwise I think it would have still remained unplayed to this day. So therefore, Revelations unfortunately gets a 1 out of 6 for replayability. And funnily enough, I'm already bored of talking about this map. I guess I better wrap this up before its score gets any lower. Revelations' overall score sits roughly around the 3 out of 6 mark, which is honestly pretty fitting. It's a very safe map that banks on nostalgia for a very comfortable ending to this game's zombie story. That is, until Black Ops 4 came along and ruined everything.